Welcome to Pop Chat. My name is Annette Tarpley, and I am the founder of the Passion of Poetry and host. And today I'm very happy to have my dear friend, and always welcome back, always enjoy your enlightenment, Richard or Rick Spisak. So thank you for joining me today.
It's my pleasure. Always happy to visit with my dear friend Annette, a talented interviewer, a poet, a woman of great genius and talent.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So us being late today is entirely my fault. Well, not entirely. There was a little technical difficulty, but mostly my fault. So thanks, Rick, for being so patient. And he helped me with my new audio thing. So I'm hoping that sounds a little bit better. Maybe it'll work. So I needed your expertise before in the past because all those microphones I spent a lot of money on and probably threw away. There's probably nothing wrong with them, I suppose, huh? It was the operator.
Little pilot error goes a long way.
Yeah. Would you use a specific audio system there?
No, I spend enough time in audio gear and lighting gear and video gear that unless I'm going to be trying to achieve absolute pinnacle audio quality, the average standard microphone is really good enough. In a studio application, there's obviously certain things you want to use, you want to avoid, and certain microphones you prefer. But in this is guerrilla broadcasting. I salute you for it. Once upon a time,
broadcasting. What does that mean?
In other words, seat of the pants, small person, small proprietor, independent producer, that sort of thing. I worked in broadcast for a while, in TV stations, radio stations, and there were regulations once upon a time, and obviously back then you needed the best possible quality to achieve something that could be received through broadcast. Okay.
Yeah.
But now we have such fine digital technology that when it works, that's the caveat, when it works, it's awesome. It's powerful. It's very effective. And here, the expression is mom and pop, a mom and pop, but an independent producer is the way I like to think of it. An independent producer can bring content forward to a broad audience with very modest support economically, technology wise. It's off the shelf. Any person can go to the average computer store, buy enough gear there for under $1,000 and have a TV show, have a TV station. And that's amazing.
Yeah, there is. You said a minute ago, guerrilla broadcasting or whatever, and I'm thinking I'm chimpanzee. I have not yet evolved to the gorilla level.
The term arose during the 60s and 70s when people were, getting good enough gear that they could go out and shoot, whether it be a demonstration or a political act or an environmental issue or, some socially relevant, important topic that wouldn't otherwise get covered. And, we called it guerrilla broadcasting back then. You'd grab your $500 camera instead of the $8,000 camera. And, you'd go to, for a perfect example, I started in broadcast when there was only, these $8,000 cameras. If you talked about videotape, you were talking about a machine that was literally almost $1 million each. And you had big reels. And when you wanted to edit a video, you put that tape on a cutting block, and with a razor knife, you cut it, put tape over it, and then you now had a combined composite video element. Well, you and I can do that with a mouse click. And I was around when I actually introduced old school producers to mouse edit technology, right? And where I had been going when I first started as an independent producer, I would go to these broadcast recording studios paying $600 an hour to edit video, right? Well, as technology improved, I was able to go in after I'd already done all the preliminary edits on my laptop. And then I'd come in, and instead of buying 6 or 8 or 10 hours, I would buy 2 hours. So I would just go in for special effects, 2D, 3D animation, stuff like that. And my friends who ran these studios, who owned these studios, who had $4 million invested in a building and all this electronic technology, they would say, Rick, why aren't you, buying 10 hours or 20 hours? Why are you only buying 3? And I'd say, because I did most of the edit on my laptop. And they'd go, no, don't tell me, because it was like
saved money, didn't it? So, and that's interesting because you said you went into the studio, so you bought studio time, right?
Yeah,
so
$600 an hour. Yeah,
$600 an hour, which is interesting because a couple years or so ago, got asked by Blue Ridge PBS to come into their studio and do some of my podcasting through their studio. And so we did like a pilot. And actually, I had Raul, I Am James on as my person that we, we're trying it out.
Gentleman.
A fine gentleman, and we miss him dearly, right? Great loss for our world, but we have his genius still in print and on video. But what I thought was interesting was I went to the studio, and I'm thinking it's all going to look great and everything. One thing I didn't like the headphones. I don't like the headphones. But I could hear great. So I could hear great. But when I look back at the video when they were all done with their editing or whatever, I noticed that it was a faraway shot. Their camera was clear up across the room in a corner. And it was this very long shot, not a close-up shot. And it wasn't very becoming. And then the other thing was the lighting was horrible. I looked like I had no makeup on, like I had dark circles. I looked really bad. The only thing that was good was the sound.
The thing that a lot of people don't recognize, and it's one of those things that only a real professional understands, that unless the scene is lit well, it's going to look scary.
Yeah.
And it really, the camera position, the composition of the shot is critical. Yeah. It's critical. And as a matter of fact, it's funny. When I brought my first independently produced project to the studio, the editor, who'd been an editor for 30 years, says to me, Rick, this is very nice what you did. He said, but the video is too pretty. They actually had an aesthetic that it had to look industrial. They didn't want anything too pretty. Now, this is way pre-MTV when, all the rules went out the door. And in fact, I got the biggest argument I ever got on a studio stage was from the lighting director saying, I had a rock band. We were doing early rock and roll TV, right? So I had a red-haired pianist, gorgeous red hair pouring down his back, right? So I had always lit him with a yellow spot and a red spot. And by positioning those against his hair, it was like his head was on fire. It looked beautiful.
He had flames.
The studio director says to me, you can't do that. We need to have neutral lighting. And I said, no. If you were taking a test, my friend, and you wanted to optimize the performance of your cameras for, quote, true reality, yeah, you're right. But that's not what we're doing. We're doing rock and roll TV. So for rock and roll TV, that I have a red, yellow flare on this flaming rock and roll player.
Wow. And that was appropriate, wasn't it? Wasn't it appropriate?
It took me an hour's argument to finally let him to get off my back,
Yeah. Well, when I did it, and I gave the guy feedback because it was going to cost me studio time too, $200, right? Which I didn't mind occasionally doing and recording from their studio if it looked good. But when I said I do better at home, everything is better except for the audio. Everything is better at home, as far as the visual and the closeness of it. It's just, and he said he had never had any complaints. And I thought that was really odd, that I'm the only one that looked bad, So
now, most, unfortunately, just like most of life, there's a lot of people that have a little tiny bit of power and it goes to their head this medium, this talk show medium, is done at most as a 2-shot and typically a tight shot of the person who's
Yeah.
expounding the topic. I mean,
But
look
I
at
was
any
like,
talk show.
"Whoa," back there. Yeah, it was like way back there. You could see like it wasn't a close up of me like this. It was like from way afar. It was just horrible. But
You know,
anyway, one thing I have noticed when I do my videos, when I look back on these podcasts, I very often find that my audio is more distorted and not as clear as others. So I got this new microphone, which I'll be anxious to listen back on how it's doing. And I got, when Alan Johnson was alive, he would recommend microphones, but I could never get it hooked up and act, reacting with my camera and everything. And so you helped me with that just a minute ago. You taught me something in 2 seconds. So when I couldn't hear you after it hooked up, right? And you were like, well, Annette, I think it's this. And you said something about a sound card. I was like, I know nothing about no sound card.
Let me tell you one little story that'll tell you how I got very fascinated with the whole world of TV broadcast. I've always been a storyteller. I did interviews when I was 8 and 10 years old. I'd carry a recorder around. But my very first day on the job in a broadcast TV studio, I'm sitting there. They said, wait on the set until the tape is done. Then you're going to rush that tape to the airport. So I'm just standing there, right? Production assistant. The TV director finishes. He took a whole day to get this guy to smile just the way he wanted. It was the old Georgia cop, Smokey and the Bandit style sheriff. And it was a mock-up of Smokey and the Bandit. This guy was supposed to say a line and smile. The director didn't like it. Finally, at 4:00 in the afternoon, okay, that's fine. We'll take that one. So then the producer calls him aside and said, wait a minute, I want to get a photo of you and our talent on the set. And the director's like, oh, Jesus, man, we've been here all day. Let's go get a drink. And he said, no. For me, go sit on camera, with the host, with the talent. I want a picture of you. Okay, fine. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to the director, a production assistant walks behind the producer, hands him a cream pie, and the producer plants a cream pie in the director's face. And I said, this is it. I love this. I got to do this.
Well, that was kind of fun, wasn't it?
I thought it was great. The director wasn't so thrilled, but I thought it was great fun.
And delicious, I'm sure, right? If it's cream pie, yeah. That's a great story. That's a great story. We have a couple comments from Cheryl Jackson. Thanks, Cheryl, for joining us. She's saying hi to us. Good afternoon, Cheryl. And Cheryl is probably, her and Jill are my biggest admin help. They are huge with Pop and have always been faithful and always there. So I appreciate her help. Hello, Richard. Hello, Annette. And so we got one viewer, but we could get some more later. You never know. Hopefully people will watch it later. Sometimes, but I find even myself, I don't know how you are, when there's a live podcast, a lot of times I'll catch it later when it's recorded versus live for various reasons. We get phone calls or live happens. And the timing isn't always what ours is. But so, before we get more into you, I'm going to get more into you and what you do. I would like for you to share one of your poems. You told me earlier you have 6 books now that are published. And the latest one was, again,
it's called No Noise.
No Noise. And are they all available on Amazon?
They are. Yeah.
Okay, great. Are you self-published?
Yeah, I am. I've had probably half dozen short stories published independently in magazines.
Yeah.
But my books are all self-published. I came to understand a long time ago that some of the most revolutionary poets and authors were self-published initially until they caught on, and then they were distributed by other publishers. So there's, to me, there's a pejorative in a lot of people's minds. Oh my God, you're self-published. Isn't that vanity press? Well, you could say it is, but if you have something to say that's important, that's interesting, then it's just being published.
Well, you're self-published, but you also get all the royalties, right?
Yep,
Pretty much.
that's true. That's
So,
true.
which is unlike my first book I published, which I got, I don't know, I think they gave you 7 or 8% of the royalties.
Yeah, yeah.
And I sold my most books and I got nothing. You didn't even pay for the cost, for publishing. And they want you to market, and I'll do
Oh, yeah.
other, $3,000, we can give you a marketing fee. We can give you
Oh,
3
three,
days,
7.
3 days,
I,
3 days on social media,
yeah,
And it's
I helped out a neighborhood poet who wanted to get published, and she was very interested in being published by a Christian publisher who she thought would have a reputable title. And their opening package was $8,000, and,
oh,
and
yeah.
and they didn't even give her one author copy. Plus, they wanted $15,000 to market it to television, and that would guarantee her several ministers would talk about her on the show. And I asked her, I said, is this a viable alternative for you? And she said, oh God, I have nowhere near that kind of money. So I was able to find her a place that published her for $200.
Yeah. So isn't that strange to you, though? I think it's strange to really all of us who author books, that we do all the work. It's our piece, it's our work. But to get it out there, just to have people available and print to people, you have to pay them thousands of dollars up front. Plus, they get the largest percent of royalties, and you make nothing. It's wrong. Don't you think it's wrong?
Well,
It's kind of,
unfortunately,
yeah.
and I know that there are people whose business sense is, I want to take advantage of every gullible rube I can.
Right.
And that's their method,
Yeah.
I think that if you're intelligent, if you're very smart about shopping around, you can cut your expenses. You can keep that cost down to a minimum.
Yeah.
But if you're foolish or in a rush, you can expect to pay 50, 100 times more than you need to, easily.
Yeah. I think the biggest pain isn't even that amount, which up front.
Yeah.
But then when the books start to sell and you get basically nothing back.
Yeah.
And, the fruits of your labor are what, other than you have, the privilege or the honor of being published and out there. But, and marketing is difficult, and poetry is very difficult to market because it's a very small sector of people who really appreciate poetry, who don't realize that poetry exists in almost daily in things that they see and hear.
You're absolutely right. I think too many poets, too many authors believe that, once they have a book, it automatically sells. And
right. Yes.
What they fail to recognize is the fact that, number one, I think it's like 20 to 40% of people actually read books.
Right.
And then a smaller number of that read nonfiction, and a smaller number again than that read poetry.
Right.
So
they say Audible is the big thing, right?
Yeah.
Which is me. When I was traveling, that's what I would do. I didn't want to read, I would listen. And then you get the, the drama, the dramatics from the person who's doing the narration, So I think audio is big, and I think that they really push that with a lot of things. I don't think that we have enough poetry books probably in Audible format. At least, those of us who are starting out. But it makes a difference, as you know, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, look what Alan Johnson did with much of our works and what he did. So, but I still think that part of the lack of really spotlight on poetry is that people don't appreciate that art form anymore like they once. I think it's kind of a dying art to a certain extent. And I think that in many ways we've tried to reignite that flame in society by doing things like, open mics places, or more spoken word artists, tree and things like that, where we try to do it. But I really think that it goes back to school and what we learn. And maybe it's not shoving things down people's throats, but really showing them the beauty in it. And then, you know, when the kids are forced to write a poem, then it becomes almost painful for some, you know?
Yeah, I think you've really put your hand right on the problem. I believe that the fact that if education was more effective, whether
Yeah.
it be education in the arts and literature and the sciences, I
Right.
think the reason we have so many people ready ready to embrace tyranny,
Mhm.
dictatorship is a
Mhm.
factor because history was taught poorly. They didn't
Yeah.
understand what a revolution, the Renaissance was, what a revolution, the Magna Carta was. These people want to have kings again or think that that's no different simply because they're so poorly educated. The
Yeah.
point I make about poetry to people is if poetry was not effective, would it be in song lyrics? If poetry
Right.
was not effective, would it be at football games, at sports events where they chant poetic lines to
Mhm.
juice people up? Would it be heard
Greeting cards, right? Greeting
battlefields on greeting cards?
cards.
Poetry is terribly effective. It's powerful to use language
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
And in a way, I think that uh, those of us who use this art, who find this art expressive and a means to communicate, we do a service that our society doesn't want to recognize. You know, what rarefied air copywriters are in. Well, these people are poetic. They use metaphors. They use similes. They're using the language of poetry to sell product. And
Yeah.
excuse me, I think consumerism is a very part of this money grubbing society, right?
Yeah, yeah, it really is. And just looking at nature are all those things that life is poetic. You know, life is really poetic. And I think that to me, sometimes we don't listen to appreciate the words and things. For instance, even music. Sometimes I think, you know, the music is so well and the beat is so well that they're really into that, but are they really listening to what's being said? How many songs did we have when we were younger that we re-listened to as adults? We think, oh, those are really cool lyrics. I didn't realize it said that, you know, that it had this message. There's so many lyrics now, especially since I've been doing lyrics, that I really listen to lyrics more into the words because that's really the meat of it. Even though the music, of course, makes it appealing and is equally important, those words are also very important in the messages they send. And having said that, so you have that, and then I think when we do things like put our poems to music, and some people are trying to do that live now, right? There's some artists that, you know, will get musicians to even play the drums or do whatever when they are reciting their poetry and have that integral part. So it's an art form, just like music is an art form, just like, you know, painting or whatever we do, or acting as you do. And I love all of this stuff, and I love your intuitive. I could go on all day about this, but I wanted to hear me some Richard Spisak poetry because I love your poetry. I'm a great
Thank you.
fan of yours.
Thank you
And
so much.
would you start with something humorous, if you
Oh,
don't mind?
absolutely. I think I can manage that.
I
Uh,
I love your humor, so go for it.
this is a bit of political humor. This is called the sandwich case. The tossed sandwich case, this felonious assault, has been replaced. With the acquiescence of empowering panels, the Justice Department, with its great gray faces in denial. The dangerous sandwich has been tested, and chefs everywhere admit they've been bested. A salad with sandwich on the pseudo Kaiser roll to some, the gutsy kind with olives, pickles, and tomato, if that's your goal. And although some, it's a special sauce that raises it up to a misdemeanor, that should do, well, it's been sent off to the cleaners. And though I say it's the olive bits that could have been clearer or cleaner as they were undressed, while some wield mighty power sure with chalk as pen, and others turn to cold cuts, it takes guts. I won't ever pretend that that kind of violence with special sauce is the flying confirmation of the brutal attack. May I suggest the lack of ginger ale and chips is why the disgraceful case crumbles in the glitter gutter. And therefore, yes, we've called the sandwich board bread or rolls. Please let us have more. As state police and federales have come, they've stayed to investigate and get their jollies. And what have they done? A little more than a tossed salad on a Kaiser roll. And since I've tasted several in and out of flight, they're downright a treasure, and I have two each night. Brutal mayhem has been alleged, yet the felony charge the grand jury demurred. It's well beyond, they say, over the edge. Murals lauding this revolutionary confectionery have appeared overnight. It's so goddamn incendiary, demanding the dropping of all charges as if this rabid prosecutor claims the villainy has so enlarged it simply told, hey, get a life, go home, visit the wife. An example, they say, of the deep state power, this sandwich thrower, enriched by the baker's flour power, who was immediately detained and seized. His liberal brain could not contain the insurrectionist rebellion that clanged so far beyond restraint. He felt it wasn't enough to say that would-be Nazis from ICE should not stay. They should, at the very least, just go away.
Wonderful. So you are reading that, and recently I revisited, and I'm sure that you probably have seen this before, but it was a Johnny Carson show. And do you remember the cowboy poets that used to come on there?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Right. So I revisited one of them, and the one with the really long mustache, and he was always so humorous, and he'd stand up, and they're very dramatic. And this reminded me of his poem, because he was talking about vegetables being eaten, and the vegetables were kind of talking, right? And so it kind of reminded me of that. It was brilliant, like that was, and I really enjoyed it. That's so good. Your mind sometimes. I'm a little worried, Richard, because your mind goes in places where no one else goes. So
you're absolutely right there, my dear.
No, I'm not worried. I think it's marvelous. So, and that makes you the creator that you are. And so we have Sarfraz Ahmad, who has joined us. You know Sarfraz, don't you?
Sure.
And he is my co-writer for our second book, Two Hearts, My Poetry is on SoundCloud. Yes, it is. And Cheryl says, me too. Richard is the most amazing storyteller. And indeed he is. And that was political brilliance, Richard. So, Richard, talking about, he just said something, that the storyteller part. So you do many things. And one of the things that you said that you do that I included in here, and all of a sudden is escaping me, you call yourself a what?
An information sculptor.
Information sculptor. Love that. Love that. And you also have your other accolades of things you do. So I know you kind of touched base a little bit on like sound or lighting or things that you've done in the past as far as production is concerned, but you really do a lot of things. And one of the things that you shared earlier is I know that you also highlight poets as I do, long before I did. And you've given so much to the community too, and to enhancing or bringing attention to others' talents. But the other thing you do, and you said a little bit ago, is you do the theater acting. Was it Shakespearean stuff?
Yep, we do both Shakespeare and contemporary writers and dramatists. I've been hosting Shakespeare parties literally since the late 70s.
Really?
I used to write for a radio show, and
Right.
One day we were all noticing, because we'd get together an hour before the show and write furiously and then perform it. And one day we were talking and we said, geez, we love Shakespeare. Wish we could do some but it was only an hour show. And you can't do much unless you just butcher it. And none of us wanted to butcher it. So what I started holding was Shakespeare parties. I would invite a bunch of friends over. I'd say, bring a covered dish, bring a copy of the play of the day. And we would then put all the character names into a hat and draw for parts. And it added so much. And
so you had females playing male parts and vice versa sometimes then, right?
Old people playing young people and young people playing old people. I've had 90-year-olds and I've had 10-year-olds in these parties. And it was always miraculous. And, Shakespeare, and there's a whole argument was it Shakespeare? Was it this one? Was that? That to me is irrelevant. The writing is incredible. The ability to understand human beings is miraculous. So like I said, I've been doing these for a long time. I tend to stay with the comedies most of the time. There's a few of the serious ones I'll do, but I've been doing it for a long time. And then once, when COVID happened, I was traveling at the time, and I didn't have this group of 20 to 50 people that I could invite to come to a dinner because I was on the road. So I thought, I'm going to try this on Zoom, see if it works. So I invited my Zoom poet friends and I said, does this sound interesting to you? So I would put up a grid of random numbers and I'd say, pick a number. That number is tied to a part because unfortunately there's no hat yet that we can grab across the internet, right? So by putting up a grid of random numbers, first come, first serve, everybody got a part. And it has been just a ton of fun. And I've got them up.
So when you do this, let me try to figure this out because I've never seen it before. I'm trying to figure out in my mind how you do it. Is it an online event?
It's an on Zoom event. I call it Zoom Experimental Shakespeare.
And when you divvy up the parts, so everybody gets the part, right? So do they rehearse ahead of time and you come back? And so they picked a number and then you come back and you perform? Or is it you're on? Show's
it's a
on.
cold read. And see, luckily, I have them pick the character role a week or 2 or 3 in advance.
Right.
So the conscientious among them, and there are a few, will read up and see what their part is and what they do and this and that. Others don't. Others just come and read it cold. Now, as you know, poets can be a pretty passionate bunch. And some of them will read that part with gusto, with verve, and others will read it like they're just discovering this word and reading a contract. But that's okay. I only have one rule. My one rule is you can't correct anybody. You can't say, oh, no, you didn't say, no.
Good for you.
None of that at all.
That is very good. Yeah.
One of the beauties of random casting is that, the whole casting couch thing, out of the way. The whole, you're a favorite, so therefore you get out of the way. All that stuff.
So how do you select your people that you're going to have on there? Because I've never been picked. I'm just saying.
Well, I could be
a little dramatic.
Not only do I invite all my friends, I probably send out an invitation to 20 to 30 people, but I also post it up on Facebook. Okay. If you're interested in an experimental Zoom theater, write this address, because I put up one of my email addresses, and I'll say, write the address and tell me that you're interested. And if you do that, I'll say, okay, take a look at the grid, pick a number, write me at that address and tell me the number you've picked. And then I will tell you back immediately, what your role is. And now, does it work all the time perfectly? Oh God, no. Does everybody who pick a part do a great reading? No, but that's not the point. This, this is not a test. It's not a, no one's going to be graded. It is the play, the fun of experimenting with a character, with a role, with a dilemma. We just finished Tempest. Amazing, wonderful piece. Before that, we did Midsummer Night's Dream. And then before that, this summer, we also did Merchant of Venice. And Merchant of Venice is interesting because a lot of people misunderstand. And first, let me say this first. a lot of people think of Shakespeare as this god of theater that mortal men and women should not. You know what? That's garbage. The guy wrote for vaudeville. It was vaudeville. Most of his audience was illiterate. Most of his
Really?
audience had never even seen a book, much less read, or or could do that. So he was really playing, and just like opera, if you can read the scripts, it's vaudeville. There's fart jokes, there's innuendo, there's oh, look at her, oh. And all of the normal human stuff, it's all in there. Now, at times, are there important themes of human nature discovered? Oh, absolutely. Anyway, so we did Merchant of Venice, right?
But don't you think that a lot of people are intimidated by Shakespeare, and I am. Although one of these days I would like to try what you're doing, and I might look like a fool, but you have to put the bug in my ear. But the thing is it's Old English, right?
Comfort comes after the first 15 minutes. It
really
does.
Really?
And believe it or not, you know how I got convinced? When I was probably in my early 30s, my kids were going to a Montessori school.
Right.
One I could afford, two was iffy, the third one, it was impossible. So my wife and I went to the instructors and said, we have to pull out. They said, well, wait a minute, you and your wife are so talented. Could you teach a class for me? And I'll we'll work out the economics. So she said, would you teach literature or drama? And I said, sure, because she knew I wrote a radio show. So she said, well, fine, what would you do? And I said, I'm going to teach Shakespeare to these kids. She said, Rick, these are like 5th graders through 7th graders. You can't have them read Shakespeare. I said, no. You're not thinking of Shakespeare like he is. He's a sitcom. He's not elevated only for the upper crust. That's baloney. I said, for example, she said, well, what would you start with? I said, I'm going to start with King Lear. King Lear? Well, that's about some crazy old king. I said, no, think about it for a second. The play starts around the family dinner table. And the father makes the mistake that fathers everywhere, that children everywhere make. They want to know who loves them more. I said, now what child have you ever met that didn't wonder, were they the special one or was the other one? Was it the brother they like more or the sister they like more? That was the special one. Every child knows that. And that's exactly.
And it's a contemporary concept throughout history, isn't it? Really? I mean, it's contemporary, right?
And she said, oh, Rick, I don't, but what about the language? I said, you know what, to it. You sit in on the class. And if you think that children don't understand, I will agree to whatever you want. But I said, I think that the community mind, that these kids collectively, what A doesn't get, B will get. What B doesn't understand, C will understand. What D doesn't understand, E can explain it to her. And that's exactly what happened. She was so floored. Just the first 2 scenes, she's like, I wouldn't have believed it. I would have told you that, 30 years of being an educator, this would be impossible. And she said, yet they do. I said, it's not me, it's Shakespeare. The guy understands human beings. And if you can present it effectively, now you've got something.
Because he's really a master of observing human nature, really, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And then presenting it in his various forms. I need to maybe embrace more of Shakespeare and get into it. I think for some, like when I was in school, I went to 10 schools, 2 of them twice. I never had a beginning or ending and everything. I was thrust into things. And so I had a hard time. It's a wonder I ever went to college or finished a master's degree. I mean, then I did have some normalcy and I didn't have that abruptness, but I always questioned my intelligence for a long time, but it's just because I was always lost.
Well, let me tell you one little story about the Merchant of Venice, right? The conventional wisdom is it's about this evil Jewish guy, and it's all about all the stereotype Jewish stuff. And what I have come to understand about that play is, in my opinion, the Christians behave worse than the Jewish guy does. So when I, the grid was up, I get a person picks it. The guy who picked the Shylock character, the Jewish moneylender. And the thing is, if you understand it in a context, in the historical context, Jewish people were not allowed to own property at that time. So the only business they could be in, they couldn't sell vegetables or furniture or rent. All they could do was send money. That's all they could sell. So they were money lenders by force, right? So the person who drew that part, the part of Shylock, says to me, Rick, I looked up the part. I can't do that. I'm Jewish. My God, I'd be insulted. I said, my friend, I think I know what your problem is. I think your problem is those nasty Christians. They behave worse than the Jewish guy did. And he said, no. It's okay. I said, no, wait a minute, really? I said, look at the play. The Christians, even though they quote, they win, but they force him way over bounds. They do way more. They really are. They're really negative to him. He learned his lesson. He came to understand that he was being, angry, but for darn good reason. His life had been poisoned by the culture that he lived in. Well, of course he's going to react with some anger. And unfortunately, the Christians who were in power behaved worse. They weren't forgiving. They weren't like, okay, well, now that you've learned. No, they extracted every bit of flesh there.
Yeah.
And he said,
do you think that Shakespeare is something that as you read or listen to it or watch the play, that when you watch it or listen to it again, that you're picking up on stuff that maybe you didn't get before?
Well, I've been, like I said, I've been a Shakespeare enthusiast for a long time.
No, but so you know it and you've analyzed it. But to those the newbies into it, do you think that might be true as far as really understanding it? I personally find it a little. I want to be able to understand more, but I need to read it more. So, but I find it sometimes a little complex.
Well, the other thing in that particular play, who's the smartest person in the play? A young woman. The young woman figures it out. She dresses up like a scholar, impresses the court with her understanding, and she solves the impasse. She's the one that figures it out and makes everything better. And her boyfriend, her fiance, who's just part of the debris of the story, he's like, wow, you figured this all out, and you figured it out while you were dressed as a man because they wouldn't take you serious as a woman. So I think that play is amazingly relevant.
That's talking about feminism, really, isn't it? So he was kind of before his time.
Well, the final,
like Queen, the rock group.
One final note on that story. The guy who ultimately ended up taking the part, right? Another actor took the part. So after he performed it, he says to me, Rick, I didn't tell you, but my mother taught Shakespeare at Oxford. I said, you're kidding. He said, not only that. He said, I played Shylock. I played that Jewish character for her on the stage at Oxford. I said, are you kidding me? He said, you know what? The whole time I'm reciting my lines, I'm hearing my mom's stage directions in my ear.
Oh, wow. So he probably did a pretty good job then, I would imagine.
So in a way, it was really good that the other guy didn't understand.
Right. That's interesting. I have a cousin. My first cousin was a professor at Oxford for like 10 years, political science. So that's the only connection I have to Oxford, my cousin. But brilliant mind. So, having said all of that, we have more comments from. I don't think we read this one before. So Cheryl is giving you another accolade. That was political brilliance, Richard, and she absolutely loves William Shakespeare. And yes, it's Old English. And then she talks about Macbeth, Othello, Midnight Summer's Night are my favorites. And So I have all of Shakespeare's because I know they've all made it to the stage and the theater, but those big ones. And so have all of them made it to the big screen too, as like a movie
I would say
production?
most of them. Most of them.
Yeah. And you know who did a lot of Shakespeare?
Who's that?
Well, who do you think? You were thinking back, think back into the 60s.
Well, Burton is one of my
Yes,
favorites.
exactly. Richard Burton. Yeah. Yeah. And he was great at it.
He was one of my favorites. She spoke about her favorites. My favorite is Coriolanus. It's
What is it?
relatively it's
What is
relatively
it called?
undone. Coriolanus.
I don't know that one.
I can summarize it very briefly. A general, a soldier simply because he's of nobility. Okay, so he's put in charge of a bunch of soldiers. They're being attacked. Rome is being attacked, and their Roman army is losing to this country called or city state called Coralie. Anyway, at the critical moment of the battle, this guy Coriolanus decides that by God he's not going to see Rome defeated, so he leads a charge, and it took the enemy so by surprise that his troops end up pushing the people from Coralie all the way back to their city gates. And this guy Coriolanus said, "Let's not stop there. Let's go in and fight them in their city." And he leads in, and nobody follows. They're scared. They don't want to go. Well, long story short, he goes back to Rome. They said, "Oh my God, you were so amazing. You need to be a leader. You need to be in charge of the city." And he said, "No, I'm not interested. I don't want to be in politics. Forget about it." Yeah, but you're obviously such a great leader. My God, you should do this. Anyway, they convince him. Then, when he finally says yes, they said, "Okay, now here's the thing. What you got to do is go into the town hall when we're all going to gather to vote, and you take off your robe and you show them all your wounds." He said, "Are you kidding me?" He won't pander. He refuses to pander. They go, "Yeah, oh, well, so you're too good? Too good? You don't even want to show your wounds?" He's like, showing them, not showing them is not important. What we did together as a community, it was all. Anyway, they throw him out. They ban him from Rome. So he goes to the enemy and says, "You know what? I'm pretty pissed off at Rome. Let's go attack Rome." And they go, Anyway, so he leads their army to attack Rome. And as their army's at the outskirts, they send out his friends. They go, "Oh, Coriolanus, we're really sorry. I mean, all's forgiven. I mean, please don't do this." Then they send out his wife and kids. "Please, don't, all our family will be killed." So the play is about, what do you owe yourself? What do you owe your city, your government? What do you owe your civilization? What do you owe your town? Now, are you allowed no pride? Are you allowed no sense of self? Or what point do you have to say no? Very interesting play. Very interesting play. And in a world of hyper patriotism, a very important play.
So it's very interesting. So I think at the crust of a lot of his writing is really humanistic and moralistic and all those kind of views that we has a lot of lessons, I think, probably.
Oh my God, absolutely. Yeah.
So when you describe it, if you think of William Shakespeare and you would describe him, in what genre, what would you describe him? As a playwright, a short storyteller, as a poet, all of those encapsulated into one?
I would say this man's understanding and comprehension of the human soul is so comprehensive. To me, he's an anthropologist who can tell an amazing story about all kinds of positives and negatives of the human character. Whether it be the betrayer of Iago, or the valor of Henry, or the puzzled indecisiveness of Hamlet, and he tells it with such a wit and he understands both men and women so very well. I wish he was taught effectively. I wish he was taught like the vaudevillian he was, like the 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 comedy writer he was. But instead, they put him up on this pedestal, and if you don't grovel, the English teachers of today will think that you don't appreciate him. Well, that's a
Right.
crock. That's a crock. And I blame so much of our poor education system that people don't understand civics, they don't understand history, they don't understand the necessity of science. Science? These rubes want to debate science? It's
Yeah. Yeah.
I try to make common cause with intelligent people because that's the only people we're talking to.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, he really has a grasp of human nature. And yeah. Yeah. I think he was so let me ask you this question. So if there could be somebody, one person in history that you could spend a day with, who would it be?
Wow, that's a really tough one. I think Pericles would be interesting. I think
All right, I'll give you three. No, keep going because yeah, it's hard to. So go ahead and give me your repertoire, people.
I was just going to say, I love the arts and the sciences, so I would
Right.
hate to favor one versus the other. I think there are some artists
Mhm.
whose transcendent grasp of the human condition is so world changing. I think of Michelangelo or Da Vinci, or a mind like Heisenberg or a mind like Oppenheimer, Jonas Salk. These kind of folks are my hero. Diane Fossey, just people whose understanding, whose thirst for knowledge is so
Yeah.
paramount that they leave other things aside. Um, and speaking of aside, I'd like to offer you a side dish of what I call broccoli and ode. Are you ready for another poem?
I am ready. Why don't you do that? And why don't you give me two poems?
Okay, okay. This is called broccoli and ode. I love the tiny trees of old broccoli. I see as Gargantua, perhaps Paul Bunyan, so substantua, devouring a forest, hand over hand, barely leaving anything but the gritty sand. Broccoli in soup leaves me droop, and baked, I think, a dastardly mistake. Breaking those tiny branches into kindling makes me hungry, especially when the supply in the fridge is dwindling. I will, on occasion, with a little persuasion, sprinkle some across a salad and then sing out its praises in a little ballad. But make mine steam the very stuff of dreams, add a drizzle of salty butter or a pound of cheddar's better, and send that broccoli my way on dusty road or main highway. Just pass me another, will ya, please, brother?
All right. Well, now I'm hungry because I was already hungry. Now you're talking about broccoli and butter and everything. Yeah. So, yeah, I love your stuff. It's always so comedic. So do you find that because really think about poetry, and although some people show their wit and maybe humor in poetry, I don't think it's a real common thing for people to interject that. You know what I mean? Maybe a little bit of wit, but I think the vast majority of actually it's an art form in itself, being able to use your wit and to go into that humorous kind of realm, because I think it takes a totally different mindset. Not that you can't do serious too, but I think wit kind of takes it to a different level as far as I think not everybody possesses that ability to be able to convey that in their poetry, which you possess. You have your thing is you have a vast variety of talents, and you're able to transition from one thing to another, whether it be, something serious, whether it be about love or politics, or whether it be something comical or something, a little satire here and there. So I think that you're able to do what many of us can't do, which shows me you're you're a pretty sharp knife in the drawer. That's what it
You're
shows.
very kind, my friend. Very kind indeed.
Yeah, but not everyone can do that. So you have a lot of versatility. So kudos to you. So if you could give me a tenth of your talent, I would be appreciative.
I'll put it. Hook up your 3D printer and I'll send some over.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question, which I'd asked you before. Hold on just a second. Oh, here it is. Okay, got it. And this is the beloved Aladdin's lamp question. You come across Aladdin's lamp tomorrow, and you're granted 3 wishes. Anything your heart desires. What are your wishes today?
Well, that's a tall order to do without any reflection, but I'll give it a go.
Okay.
I would say first and foremost, I would start a network of communications, TV, satellite, whatever you want to call it, and give those voices that are shuffled off to the side, the non-corporate voices, give an opportunity to artists, players, musicians who don't get a chance to have their work shown, and who never will see the inside of a network television studio, and give them a chance to tell their story. Because I think there are so many stories not being told. And because we know there is a strong, almost insurmountable corporate bias to commercial media. If it doesn't make money, it's not on air, period. If it doesn't support our sponsors, if it calls into question the sensibility or the danger of their product or service, it's not going to be seen. Now, you and I know that there are, I'm going to call them again, guerrilla broadcasters out there, people like yourself telling stories that won't otherwise be told. But we are the rare thing. We have one free speech TV, but how many Fox Newses are there? You could just go on and on and on, counting OAN, Newsmax, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, Sinclair, huge networks controlling so much attention of the American mind. And that is a shame.
And swaying opinions, based on their very often biased views, right?
The other 2 things I would do is I would fund healthcare and college educations. Because you know as well as I do that the cost of a real education is astronomical. That the cost of real healthcare, not commercially driven, how much dollars can we wring out of that corpse before we have to bury it, but real healthcare, how expensive that is. And those are the 3 things that I would do.
So really, you're tapping into talents that are unseen, and wanting to promote talents that might not be seen, whether that is in lack of education and being able to, improve yourself and your possible contribution to society because of, what you can do with that education. And then you also want to bring light to those people who, we have a lot of famous poets or people in literature, but they're the unseens and the ones that are kind of behind the scenes and haven't reached the notoriety can write very often just as well, if not even better, than those people who are well known. So, and being able to expose others to their talents is a great thing. So, and I still want to go ahead. I'm sorry, sir.
I was just going to say, I had a funny experience with a publisher early on in my adventures. There was a gentleman named Andrei Codrescu, a European author and professor. And he published a magazine called The Exquisite Corpse. I heard his commentators work on NPR quite a bit. I was very impressed with his writing, with his thinking. And at one point, he mentioned that there were, people could apply to his magazine, The Exquisite Corpse, to be published. So I sent him some material. I called him first to see if I could submit material, did. And I decided that if it wouldn't hurt if I could help him get a showcase for him and his magazine. And I had appeared recently at the Miami Book Fair. So I put him in touch with the people who do the Miami Book Fair and got him a slot in the book fair. And so when he came to town, he said, Richard, I really like your writing. It's thoughtful. It's intelligent. You use good language. Your metaphors are great. It's funny. It's smart, politically savvy. I said, so you like my work? Well, which of my poems are you going to publish? He said, should I be frank? And I said, so? He said, well, Richard, most publishers publish because they want to be famous. They really, really want to be famous. He said, so right now, my next feature magazine is going to be an article and several articles by Margot Hemingway. Now, he said, the young lady is very famous, can't write her way out of a paper bag. But you see, it will make me more famous by publishing her.
Right. Because she has a name. Yeah.
I said, okay, I understand that. I mean, I'm not naive, but is there no room whatsoever for what you called witty, intelligent writing? He said, to it, when you get famous, you let me know. And I said, thank you. That was education.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So, I've always had this fantasy since I was small, that I go up to a famous person and I don't ask them for their autograph. I give them mine.
There you go.
Because you are just as important as Margot Hemingway, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's what my point is. Not that I don't respect someone's fame or their what they've achieved in their lives, but it doesn't lessen someone else's importance. So, according to my grandmother in a genealogy book she has, I am related to Ernest Hemingway, supposedly.
There you go.
So, I don't know. I mean, my name's in the book. His name's in the book. Grandma's the same generation as him, and I think I'm the same generation as Margot. So, but
well, then this is a family story.
Richard,
I was telling you.
No. If you go back far enough, because it goes back to the 1600s when they started tracking it, you and I are probably just as related as me and Hemingway. So. Well,
if you have time for one more story, I got to tell you this about the whole fame thing.
Yeah.
I've been writing my style of writing since the anti-war days of the 1970s. Okay. And I've been told many times that, Rick, if you write sadder, not so much funny doesn't get you famous, but you should write sadder. I said, it's not what I write. I write what my muse suggests to me, and that's what I write. Well, one time I was working at this engineering and architecture firm, and this one engineer really liked my stuff. He liked my environmental poetry. He liked my political stuff. He liked my science poetry. And he said, Richard, would you mind if I tried to help you get promoted? And I said, brother, if it works for you, then you do that. So one day he walks into my office and he said, Richard, you won't believe this, but I got a letter here in my hand for you from the Johnny Carson show. I said, are you kidding me? He said, no, here it is. They want you to call. I said, what, you sent my poetry to the Johnny Carson show? And he goes, well, yeah. And I went, well, I'm completely shocked. So I give these guys a call and they said to me, okay, listen, we think your stuff is great. Okay. You're an excellent poet, funny, witty, smart, all that stuff. He said, now what we'd like to do is we'd like to put you up on the stage and we'll throw like random words at you and you make a poem out of it. I said, that's not what I do. That's not my act. Yeah. I write poetry, thoughtful poetry that is about science or art or humanity or politics, that's meant to make you think and laugh. That's what I do. I don't stand there and do a free form thing and just like randomly rhyme stuff. That's not what I do. They go, yeah, well, that's what we want you to do. And I said, well, tell you what, you're looking for somebody else. They go, yeah, but don't you want to? We'll fly you out. We'll put you up. And I go, no, I understand, but no, that's not. If you want me to read my stuff, I'm happy to do it. If you want to give me a topic and have me write something about it and I bring it, that's fine too. But no, I'm not a
right.
happy puppet.
You're not a puppet, right? A poetry puppet where
they go, well, we can't believe that. And I said, well, okay, thanks a lot. And my friend, the engineer's like, you turned down Carson? Are you kidding me?
I know, right? What? You couldn't. Were you married to your wife at the time?
Yeah. I mean, look,
didn't you say, honey, couldn't you have just given a little try?
And I know that it's easy to come up with rhymes, and all poetry doesn't have to rhyme. It could be free verse, it could be thoughtful, but that's not what I do. And I would have felt false to my guide, to my spirit, my muse to do something.
That isn't true to what your form and what you do. It isn't. Yeah. So kudos to you to say no to that, which probably hardly anybody would have done. They would have just done it. But you were true to yourself and what you stood for and what you're about. So same kind of thing, right? So you didn't ask for Johnny. They were asking you for your autograph. You didn't ask Johnny for his, right? They were saying, we want you. So kudos to you. And I think it takes a lot of, I think that I always think it's very admirable when we do things like that. And, I don't need this spotlight because I've had things like that happen to me. We need you to do this. And then we'll put you here on the cover of a magazine or do whatever. And it's like, I don't want to do that. I don't need to be on the cover of your magazine or whatever it may be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that goes against what I believe in. And I'm not going to do that to be on your cover. So you can just find someone else. Either that or you can not request that. And I'd be happy to. You know what I mean? So, I think we have to have our scruples. We have to have our own, set of rules and what is good for us.
Right? Some of us do.
Well, there are people who don't, aren't there? Yeah.
I've noticed.
Yeah. So I want you to pick out a poem that you want to leave us with, whatever that may be, and share that with us. And then we'll kind of wrap it up. We have a comment from Cheryl Jackson. Thank you for being so. Here you go. So Cheryl Jackson again. Lucille Clifton, James Baldwin, Langston Hughes are my historical figurines, and all very great people. So yes, indeed. And Cheryl is a great poetess. So way to stand on your principles, Richard. You can't buy Richard. So, Richard, I'm going to give the stage back to you, darling.
Okay, this is a common dilemma of our time. Most of us get the commercial calls from time to time. We want to relax. We're doing something, and our phone rings, and there's someone trying to sell you something. And normally, like most people, I screen them. But one night I was a little tired. And instead of, checking to see who was calling or what was the deal, I just answered. And this is what happened. And this happened just the way I tell it. It's called, I Got a Call. I got a call the other day from a charming chap who called out, hey, we'd like to secure your house and grounds. Have you researched it yet? What have you found? I replied, I haven't looked thus far. I said, I haven't been too concerned, not full of dread. From what I learned, we have a special deal this week, he said. We have everything that you might seek. What type of service interests you? I replied to his inquiry. It left for me, since I was intrigued by this, even inspired, So I replied, could we get some critters from the zoo, perhaps a tiger, a leopard, or an ape or two. They could patrol they could patrol and scare off intruders, like a pack of black-tip sharks, say from Bermuda, or maybe a pack of wolves to patrol at night. It'd scare off any burglars they'd take to their heels on a cloudless night. Or maybe a laser cannon might be nice, either AI or IR on automatic, right? Either way, to pierce or sever might be just a thing. It might be clever. Mounted high above the roof on a 360 swivel, tell the truth. I'd like that better. Old Buck Rogers certainly had them. Or maybe a minefield, hidden on a sidewalk, sealed and deeply buried in the macadam. It wouldn't always need to be fatal. I mean, certainly far more dangerous than a spinning dreidel. And what do you say? Linked to X-ray scans so we could carefully detect whether it was a woman or a man? I'd really like a moat, of course. What do you charge for such a niggardly, dastardly, over-the-top resource? Complete with alligators or piranhas. Either way, what do you say? A contingent of guards might be well needed to toss them in whenever it's time for feeding. I was thinking, of course, mines. A bouncing Betty might be fine. We'd need a good map of where they were placed, or you too might get a kiss from pretty Betty bouncing where you used to have a face. Could you supply a dozen heads on spikes? It would reduce the intruders. It very well might. He sounded sheepish in his retort, and he paused and said, we had something else in mind, of course. But before he could speak, I offered this, while contemplating Bouncing Betty's bouncing bliss. A flock of peregrine falcons, perhaps, or a brace of eagles. He started nervously to laugh. He opined it would be regal, even patriotic, maybe, truth be told, or a touch psychotic. Well, he said, we had in mind a doorbell camera to show you who's at your door, or what have you. Or a package, say, there on the floor, tied to an app installed there on your phone, so you could check at your house when you're away from home. So, downhearted and a little downcast, I asked, was this all he had to offer at last? They could put sensors on the windows in case someone were to climb in and break some glass. But I said, no wildebeest, no roaming boars, no flock of noisy gooses, swans, I implored. No moats, no laser-sighted guns. Oh, gosh, I chuckled. You're just no fun. I already pay a team of orcs. They're a rowdy bunch, but they need the work. And I have a team of pterodactyls on patrol. But you know how they eat. They're so out of control. I don't think I'll get a call from that security company again.
OMG. Boy, I wonder what they were thinking on the other end there. Oh my God. So they were probably saying, hey, I'm taking him off the call list. Would you please take him off the call list? We don't need him on the call list anymore. We are not going through that anymore. That was hilarious. And you really did do that.
Just that way.
And did you have any remorse afterwards, Rick?
No. I figure if they're going to take up my time, I'm going to give them a ride.
Right? Oh gosh, that is great. And very amusing. And I can bet you that you are in their stories. I remember this time 2 years ago when I was talking to this man on the phone, and this is what he said to me. So I always say, will you remember me? Right? You will be remembered. The time that I called that 5555-9292-11111 or whatever it was. So, do you remember those? What was the number that was the bogus number they used to give on TV all the time?
I don't remember.
Oh, you don't remember? That's a quiz. Nobody remembers. Cheryl Jackson thinks that's very funny. So you've made 2 people laugh today, at least, and I'm sure many more. So I can't tell you what a joy and pleasure it is always to have you on here. And one of the many things I love about Rick is that you're always there. I come to you and say, hey, come on here. I need your expertise because you're always one of my go-to for your opinions and your knowledge and things, because you have a plethora of knowledge about many things in life, and your opinion and voice is always important to me to get. And, sometimes you can play the devil advocate, and that's always good. When you can try to enrich someone's by enlightening them to another viewpoint, and, changing their no to maybe, maybe is always good, right?
Yep.
So, but you are a joy. I wish you much luck in your future endeavors. If nothing else, send me a link the next time you're on your Shakespeare thing. Do you have those recorded somewhere?
Oh yeah, they're all up on YouTube. I'll send you a link.
Okay, send me a link because I want to see the fun that you described, because that's really interesting, especially since you kind of divvy out those roles randomly.
Oh yeah,
which I think would be very interesting. That would be more challenging by far, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So do you partake in part of the cast? You're part of the cast, aren't you?
Oh yeah. For example, we just did Tempest, so I was Caliban. I was the monster.
The monster. Did your voice change?
Oh yeah. No, I remember I did radio for 15 years, so I've got a range of voices.
Oh yeah. Oh, radio. That radio is great though, isn't it? So you should be able to narrate a lot of our stuff.
Oh yeah.
You know? Yeah, you're a source. So thank you so much, Cheryl Jackson. Anybody else who is watching, you watch this recorded version, please share it and have people aware of the pop station that we have, as well as Richard's works and his work as well. Where can they find your stuff on YouTube?
If you go to YouTube and do a search for Poets of the East, that's one good place. Or you could also search my name. That'll work too.
Very good. Very good. Do you ever delve into Poets of the West, or you just stay to the East?
Well, no. The line that I use is that every poet is a dawn. So no matter what poet you're looking at, you're seeing the sunrise.
Rises in the East, right? We're always rising. We don't want to go down. So forget about the West. That is great. I didn't know that. Wow. Well, how did I miss out on that one? That's a great story. And that is very cerebral in thought. So thank you so much. Love and blessings to everyone.
Thank you so much. Wonderful talking to you.
You too. Everyone keep writing and keep promoting poetry. Thanks so much, dear friend. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.